The first time I saw the house on Willow Lane, I thought we'd walked into a fairy tale. After years of my mother and I in our cramped, drafty apartment, with its perpetually damp smell and the distant, constant soundtrack of traffic, this place was a silent, sprawling palace. The lawn was a perfect emerald carpet. The windows were vast, clean sheets of glass that reflected the clouds. My mother, Evelyn, squeezed my hand so tightly it almost hurt. "Can you believe it, Jojo? This is our home now." Her voice was filled with a hope so fragile I was afraid to breathe on it. I was 14, old enough to remember the lean years, the string of boyfriends who never stayed, the tired lines around her eyes. But this was different. Richard was different. He stood at the grand double doors, a smile on his face that didn't seem to reach his eyes. He was handsome, I suppose, in a sharp, polished way. His hair was the color of dark sand, his jaw clean-shaven and strong. He wore a crisp white shirt and trousers that looked like they'd been painted onto him. "My two beautiful girls," he said, his voice a smooth, deep baritone. He opened his arms and my mother flowed into them, laughing. He looked at me over her shoulder. "And you must be Joanna. I've heard so much about you. I'm so glad I can finally give you the life you deserve." He made it sound like a gift he was bestowing, not a shared future we were building. I remember forcing a smile, a strange, cold knot tightening in my stomach. I told myself it was just nerves. My room was in the East Wing. It was twice the size of our old apartment's living room, decorated in shades of cream and pale pink. It had its own bathroom and a window seat that looked out over a manicured garden. It was a room for a princess in a storybook, but the door had no lock. "We don't believe in locks in this family," Richard said, his hand resting on my shoulder. His touch was heavy. "We trust each other. We're open with each other." That was the first rule. The second rule came a week later. I was in the kitchen getting a glass of water. He came up behind me, so close I could feel the warmth of his body, smell his cologne, a mix of sandalwood and something else, something metallic and cold. "You're a very special girl, Joanna," he whispered, his breath stirring my hair. His hands came to rest on my hips and I froze, the glass halfway to my lips. "What we talk about, what we share, that's just between us. A father and his special girl. You wouldn't want to worry your mother, would you? She's so happy now, we wouldn't want to break her heart." The manipulation was a masterwork. He wove my love for my mother into a cage. To speak was to destroy her. To remain silent was to destroy myself. I chose, again and again, to be the silent sacrifice for her happiness. The abuse didn't start all at once. It was a slow, creeping poison, a lingering goodnight kiss that lasted too long, an accidental walk-in while I was changing. Then, one night, the footsteps in the hall, the creak of my door, the weight on the edge of my bed, the smell of his cologne filling my lungs until I felt I was drowning. "SHHH, my special girl," he'd murmur in the dark. "This is how a real father shows his love." I would close my eyes and disappear. I'd go to a place in my mind, a small, dark corner where he couldn't find me. I'd count the roses on the wallpaper until the world came back, stained and broken. My mother, my sweet, blind mother, saw nothing, or chose to see nothing. She was too busy being Mrs. Richard Thorne, the envy of her friends, the lady of the manor. She floated through the house in a haze of contentment, her laughter like bells. To warn her would be to shatter her completely. So I carried the secret. It grew inside me, a malignant thing, heavy as stone. I was 16 when I realized my body was betraying me in a new way. The nausea in the mornings, the dizzy spells, the terrifying cessation of a cycle that had only just begun to feel normal. I hid it for as long as I could. I wore baggy sweaters. I claimed a stomach bug that lasted for weeks, but my body was no longer my own to command. The swell of my belly, small but undeniable, became a truth I could no longer conceal. I was in the garden, trying to read a book for school, when my mother came and sat beside me on the bench. The sun was shining. It felt like a mockery. "Joanna, honey," she began, her voice light, Are you feeling all right? You've been looking a bit pale." I looked at her, at the genuine concern in her eyes, and for a single, wild moment, I thought about telling her. I opened my mouth, the truth a burning coal on my tongue. And then Richard was there. He'd appeared as if from nowhere, a shadow in the bright sunlight. "What's this, my dears? A secret conference?" he asked, his voice jovial. My mother looked up at him, her expression softening. "I'm just worried about Joanna. She hasn't been herself." His eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, flicked to me, then down to my midsection hidden under a thick sweatshirt. I saw the understanding in them, and then I saw the plan. He sat down, taking my mother's hand. "Evelyn, my love, I'm afraid I have some difficult news." He sighed, a performance of paternal disappointment. "I've been waiting for Joanna to come to us herself. It seems she's been seeing a boy from school, quite seriously from the looks of it." The world stopped. I stared at him, my mouth agape. "What?" my mother whispered, her face crumbling. "I found condoms in her school bag," he lied, his voice dripping with feigned sadness. "I was going to talk to her man to man, but it seems we're too late. She's pregnant." The sound that came from my mother was a small, wounded thing. She looked at me, and for the first time, the love in her eyes was replaced by something else. Disgust. Betrayal. "Joanna, is this true?" Her voice was sharp, brittle. "After everything Richard has given us, this is how you repay him, by being a little slut." The words were physical blows. I couldn't speak. I could only shake my head, tears streaming down my face, a silent, desperate denial. "Don't you lie to me," she shrieked, standing up. "I see it now, the late nights, the secrecy I thought you were studying. Oh, my God." She turned to Richard, burying her face in his chest. "How could she do this to us?" He held her, looking at me over her head. His expression was one of perfect, pious sorrow, but his eyes were triumphant. I had been tried and convicted in the court of their perfect life. He was the benevolent stepfather, heartbroken by his wayward stepdaughter. My mother was the devastated mother, and I was the villain, the ungrateful whore who had soiled their pristine world. They decided I would be sent away. The Willows, a home for troubled girls in a remote part of the state, it was presented as a compassionate choice. To avoid the scandal. "For your own good, to give the baby up for a proper adoption," Richard said, his voice oozing false concern. The night before I was to leave, he came to my room. I was packed, my soul already gone. "You see, Joanna," he said, standing by the door, a king surveying his domain. "No one will ever believe you. You are nothing. A silly girl who made a mistake. I am a pillar of this community. Remember that. Your only role now is to be silent, to have this child, and to sign it away. Then perhaps you can come back and we can forget this ever happened." He left, and I was alone with the thing growing inside me, the living, breathing evidence of his crime. I hated it. I hated the way it moved, a constant reminder of the violation. I dreamed of giving it away, of severing this last, grotesque tie to him. But then, at the Willows, during a long, painful labor, I held my son for the first time. He was small and red and furious, with a shock of dark hair and eyes the color of a summer sky. Not Richard's eyes, my eyes. As I looked at him, at this tiny, innocent creature who had done nothing wrong, who was as much a victim as I was, something in me broke and reformed, harder and stronger. The social worker, a weary-looking woman with kind eyes named Maria, held out the adoption papers. "It's for the best, Joanna. You're so young. You can have a fresh start." I looked from her face to my son's. He curled his tiny hand around my finger, his grip surprisingly strong. "No," I said, my voice hoarse but clear. "His name is Leo, and he's mine." Returning to the house on Willow Lane with a baby in my arms was like walking back into a nightmare wearing the same skin. My mother was cold, her disappointment a frost that coated every surface. She would look at Leo, and I saw not a grandmother's love, but a reminder of her shame. Richard, however, was fascinated. He would watch Leo with a possessive, creepy intensity. "He has my jawline, don't you think, Evelyn?" he'd say, or "Look at that strength, a true thorn." Every comment was a landmine, a veiled reminder of his ownership over us. The abuse had stopped, replaced by this new psychological torment. I was his captive audience, forced to watch him play the doting grandfather. The final straw came on a night I will never forget. Leo was about 6 months old. I was walking him, trying to soothe his crying, in the long, dark hallway. Richard emerged from his study, a glass of brandy in his hand. "He's a spirited boy," Richard said, his gaze lingering on Leo. "He needs a strong hand to guide him, to teach him what it means to be a man." The implication was so vile, so terrifying that my blood ran cold. He wasn't just talking about discipline. He was talking about legacy, about continuing his cycle of warped love on another generation. In that moment, I saw my son's future reflected in my past, and it was a horror I would not allow. That night, I made a plan. I waited until the house was silent, the deep, dead silence of the early hours. I took the emergency cash I'd been hoarding from my grocery allowances. I packed a single bag with diapers, formula, and a few of Leo's things. I wrote a short note to my mother. "I'm sorry. I have to keep him safe. Please don't look for us." Then, with my son clutched to my chest, I slipped out the back door and ran into the darkness. I didn't look back. The next few years were a blur of fear and survival. We slept in bus stations, in shelters that smelled of bleach and despair. I took any job I could get, washing dishes, cleaning offices, my body aching with a fatigue that went deeper than bone. Leo was my sole reason for breathing. His laugh was the only music in my life. I changed our last name to Ryder, my father's name. We became ghosts. Then I met Ben. He was a mechanic with grease under his fingernails and a smile that could warm a room. He came into the diner where I worked the graveyard shift and always left a generous tip. He wasn't slick or polished. He was solid, real. He asked me out for 6 months before I said yes. I was so armored, so afraid, but he was patient. He loved Leo from the start, building him toy cars out of scrap wood, reading him stories with silly voices. He didn't see me as damaged goods. He saw me as strong. One night after Leo was asleep, I told Ben everything. I spilled the entire ugly story, the abuse, the betrayal, the flight. I expected him to run. Instead, he took my hand, his own trembling with a quiet rage. "No one will ever hurt you or Leo again," he said, his voice low and fierce. "I promise you." He married us in a small courthouse ceremony. He adopted Leo, giving him his name, his protection, his unwavering love. We bought a small house with a noisy, chaotic garden. It was filled with laughter and Legos and the smell of Ben's attempts at baking. It was a home. It was safe. For 10 years, I almost forgot the sound of Richard's footsteps. I almost forgot the smell of his cologne. Almost. The past has a way of finding you, no matter how deep you bury it. It was a Saturday. Leo was 12, all long limbs and a passion for astronomy. Ben was in the driveway, teaching him how to change the oil in the car. I was weeding the garden, my hands in the warm earth, feeling a peace I had fought so hard to earn. A car I didn't recognize, a sleek, silent sedan, pulled up to the curb. The door opened and my mother got out. She looked 20 years older. The elegance was gone, replaced by a gaunt weariness. Her clothes hung on her frame. She stood by the car, wringing her hands, her eyes fixed on me. My entire body went cold. The trowel fell from my numb fingers. "Joanna," she whispered, her voice cracking. Ben was at my side in an instant, his hand on my back. Leo watched from the driveway, his expression curious and wary. "What are you doing here, Mom?" I asked, my voice flat. Tears streamed down her face. "It's Richard. He's dying." I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity, just a cold, hollow echo. "He has leukemia, a very aggressive kind. He needs a bone marrow transplant. No one in the family is a match. Not me, not his brothers." She took a shaky step forward. "Joanna, we need Leo. He's our only hope." The audacity of it stole my breath. The sheer, monstrous entitlement. After everything, they wanted to mine my son's body, the son born of rape, to save the man who had destroyed my life. "No," I said. The word was simple, final. "Joanna, please. He's my husband. He's Leo's father." "He is not his father," I snapped, the fury I had kept bottled for so long finally erupting. "Ben is his father, and the answer is no. Get off my property." She left, sobbing, her frail body shaking, but I knew it wasn't over. 2 days later, he came. the sleek sedan again. He moved slowly, leaning on a cane, a shadow of the powerful man I remembered. The disease had hollowed him out, paling his skin, thinning his hair. But the eyes were the same, cold, calculating. Ben positioned himself on the porch, his arms crossed, a silent sentinel. Richard didn't even look at him. His gaze was fixed on me. "Joanna," he said, his voice a dry rasp. "We need to talk." "We have nothing to talk about." "Don't be naive. This is about a life." He started his negotiation, just as he always had. "I know I made mistakes. I was too affectionate. I can see how you might have misinterpreted things." Misinterpreted. The word was a fresh violation. "I'm prepared to be generous," he continued. "A trust fund for Leo, $1 million. I'll even sign a confession for your mother if that's what you need. I will give you the truth in exchange for my life. It's a simple transaction." A transaction. My childhood, my trauma, my son's body, all reduced to a business deal. "Get out," I said, my voice trembling with rage. His mask of civility slipped. "He is my son, my blood. You have no right to deny me." "I have every right," I screamed. "You forfeited all your rights when you climbed into my bed. Now get off my land before I call the police." He left, but his presence had poisoned the air. Leo, who had heard the shouting, was full of questions. Who was that sick man, Mom? Why was he so angry? How could I tell him? How could I explain that the man who wanted a piece of his body was the monster from my past, the reason for our years of fear? The truth would have shattered his world. We had him tested. It was my decision, a terrible, calculated one. I needed to know. I needed the power of certainty. Ben held my hand the entire time, his jaw clenched tight. The results came back. Leo was a perfect match. The weight of it was crushing. A man's life literally rested in my hands, or rather in my son's bones. The doctors, the social workers, they all applied a gentle pressure. It's a simple procedure. He's a healthy boy. You could save a life. My mother called daily, her voice a desperate plea. "He's suffering, Joanna. Have a heart, please, for me." I was torn in a way I had never been before. It wasn't about sympathy for Richard. It was about the moral weight of a life. Was I becoming a monster by denying him? Was I no better than him? But Ben, my rock, my moral compass, was unwavering. "Joanna," he said, taking my face in his hands. "This is not about saving a life. This is about him trying to control you one last time. He doesn't want to live, he wants to win. You don't owe him anything. Not an explanation, not a pardon, and certainly not a piece of our son." His words were a lifeline. He was right. This was the final battle in a war I never asked for. I agreed to see Richard one last time. I went alone. Ben wanted to come, but I needed to do this myself. This was between the monster and his victim, a final reckoning. The hospital room was sterile and quiet, the only sound the slow, mechanical beep of the monitors attached to him. He looked even smaller in the bed, swallowed by the white sheets. The scent of his cologne was gone, replaced by the stark smell of antiseptic. My mother was there, huddled in a chair. She looked at me with a mixture of hope and despair. "Joanna," she breathed, "you came." I ignored her. I walked to the side of the bed. Richard's eyes fluttered open. They were dim, but the cunning in them was still there. "You've come to be reasonable," he rasped. "I've come to give you my answer," I said, my voice calm, colder than I had ever heard it. I looked at my mother. "You wanted the truth, Mom. Here it is. The man you love, the pillar of the community, started rapping me when I was 14, in my bed, in the room you gave me. Leo is not the product of some teenage mistake. He is the product of rape, of years of torture. And you," I turned my gaze back to Richard, "you called me a slut. You sent me away. You tried to steal my son." My mother made a small, choked sound, her hand flying to her mouth. Richard's eyes widened. "Lies." "The only lie is the life you built," I said, leaning in close so only he could hear me. "You asked for my son's bone marrow to save your life. You see, my body was yours to take. My childhood was yours to steal. But my son, his body, his life, his very marrow, that is mine asterisk to protect. It belongs to me and to Ben, the man who earned the right to call him son. It belongs to a future you don't get to be a part of, and I will not give you a single cell." not one. You don't get to use him to clean the blood off your hands. I straightened up. The beeping of the monitor was faster now. You are going to die, Richard, I said, my words falling like stones. You are going to die with the knowledge that the only thing that could have saved you was the one thing your own evil made impossible for you to have. That is your justice. I turned and walked towards the door. Joanna, wait, my mother cried, scrambling out of her chair. You can't just let him die. I stopped and looked at her, this woman who had chosen a monster over her own child. I'm not letting him die, Mom. He's dying. There's a difference. You made your choice a long time ago. You live with it. I walked out of the room, out of the hospital, and into the clean, fresh air. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt empty, and then slowly a profound, unshakable peace. Richard Thorne died a week later. My mother did not contact me again. The obituary was in the paper, a glowing tribute to a philanthropist and beloved husband. We didn't go to the funeral. That evening, I stood at the window of our noisy, loving home, watching Ben and Leo in the backyard. Ben was pointing out constellations, his arm around our son's shoulders. Leo was laughing, his face tipped up to the stars, his future a wide-open road, untouched by the shadow that had finally, blessedly passed. I had carried the secret for so long, a poison in my veins. Now it was over. The cycle was broken. The monster was gone, and we, the survivors, were free. I had finally learned that some debts are not meant to be paid and some sins are beyond redemption. My justice was not in his death, but in our life, a life I had built from the marrow of my own bones, a life that was and would always be my own.